All right. Welcome everyone to the Climbing the Zero Waste Hierarchy to Highest and Best Use session at today's conference. We have 4 speakers here today covering 3 different topics. And starting with Samantha Summer, Director of Business Innovation at Upstream Solutions, then going on to Jason and Joshua, and then wrapping up with Kayla Martins, Manager of Environmental Programs at Re-Innovate. So Samantha Summers has been working in business sustainability and zero waste for almost 15 years, advising governments and businesses in their zero waste journey and working to bolster the circular economy. Before she joined Upstream as their Director of Business Innovation, she directed the award-winning program Rethink Disposal, and she'll be covering food packaging reduction efforts through Upstream that focuses on reusable packaging. Jason and Josh will be focusing on the highest and best use strategies that they implemented during their zero waste journey on their True Platinum Zero Waste certification at AstraZeneca in South San Francisco. Jason is the Director of Innovation at Ingenium Group, an environmental management company specializing in hazardous waste and recycling. And he's also the co-founder of Destination Zero, Ingenium's zero waste certification program. Josh is the site manager for AstraZeneca South San Francisco and the senior lead of site sustainability. That's a lot of S's in there. Kayla Martins is the senior manager of environmental programs at RCC at the Retail Industry Leaders Association. She'll be referring to it as RELA. She leads the zero waste and energy management communities at Retail Industry Leaders Association. In 2021, she focused primarily on sustainable packaging for retailers, and she'll be covering that the sustainable packaging efforts that RELA has made. I'll be moderating today and taking questions in the chat for which we'll hold till the end of this session. So please put any questions or comments you have in the chat and I'll pick those up and get back to them. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Daniel Hartzig, Executive Director of Waste Cap Resource Solutions here in Wisconsin. We've been a nonprofit dedicated to helping businesses get to zero waste for the last 25 years. So happy birthday, us. With that, I will pass the torch to Samantha Summer and she'll take it over from here.
Okay, you should be seeing my screen now. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure learning about all the new topics that are being covered so far today and to meet other fabulous speakers in the space and in the industry. Yeah, so I'm Samantha. I am the Director of Business Innovation at Upstream. In case you haven't heard about Upstream before, we are a national nonprofit organization innovating solutions to plastic pollution. But for us, all single use is actually the real problem. So we're enabling and accelerating the shift to reusable services and a more circular economy, focused specifically in the food and beverage industry. And we work on this through our 3 core programs: business innovation, policy, and social impact. So today I'm going to be very quickly skipping over 2 institutional transition case studies with results from single-use food serviceware to reusables. That was pre-COVID. Talk about COVID impact for a second, and then talk about how we shifted focus to the takeout and delivery explosion of single-use packaging during COVID times, when a lot of our institutions were closed, but we were supporting our local businesses and kind of, really seeing the amount of trash that's being generated from all those ordering. And so I'm going to talk about 2 quick pilots that have launched during COVID and have been successful in terms of their growth potential. And I'm going to finish off by announcing a new software solution that Upstream has been cooking up in the kitchen for the last year, and we're about to launch, soft launch in the beginning of the new year. So, and also another great resource I just wanted to share is that Upstream produced a report called Reuse Wins. I'll drop it into the chat after my talk so you can access it. But basically just looks at the amount of over 1 trillion pieces of single-use disposable fiber and plastic packaging that is consumed every year in the United States. And we're really concerned about that because not only can we not really recycle and compost our way out of these problems anymore, they're also ending up as litter that's on our streets and going out into our creeks and eventually into the shoreline and eventually into the ocean. So this statistic basically kind of looked at it from the lens of, if we were able to shift to fully reusables for on-site dining and built up the infrastructure for reuse services for takeout and delivery, whereas 82% of the United States population lives within a metropolitan region or city. So these are the types of results that we could see. Not only does it have a massive amount of dollar savings, both for government, but also for enterprise and food businesses. We also see the potential for almost 193,000 jobs being created to meet that moment of the reuse economy. And 17 billion pieces of litter could be prevented from going into our waterways unintentionally. This also is kind of backed up by, I don't know if y'all read the Ellen MacArthur report titled Reuse, but basically they claimed that through their research globally, if we replace just 20% of single-use plastic packaging with reusable alternatives, that market share is worth about $10 billion. And I think there's a lot of interest in moving to more of these reusable models. So I'm going to start with the first case study. Again, this is pre-COVID, really quickly. Palo Alto Unified School District, their contracted food vendor was Sodexo, and they built a great stakeholder team with the school board, the administration, the teachers, the staff, janitorial, maintenance, and basically came together and said, you know what, we're sick of seeing the 3,500 lunches that are being prepared in the central kitchen by Sodexo every day was being, transported by truck out to 13 different elementary schools every day, and it was all in single-use compostable foodware packaging. So the goal here was to understand what is the baseline problem. So basically, they were using 7 different types of single-use disposable items, and we targeted those 7 for a reduction or total elimination. They were going through 500,000 pieces of plastic and fiber, costing the district $32,000 and generating almost 5 tons of waste. They injected almost $20,000 in setup costs that covered about $11,000 to actually purchase reusables. They purchased reusable clamshells, polypropylene reusable clamshells. They had reusable baskets, and they also purchased reusable stainless steel sporks. And then they also spent additional over $8,000 on the supporting infrastructure. So, the carts, the bins, the dish trays, things like that. The ongoing costs associated with maintaining this new operation was estimated at $27,000 for labor, because they needed another van driver to do the reverse logistics of going to all the campuses and bringing back the reusables at the end of lunch service to the centralized kitchen for washing. And then also about $3,000 annually to repurchase any lost or broken or damaged reusables. But during this time, they were able to reduce 1 cubic yard of trash and 1 cubic yard of organics at all of the pilot elementary schools. And that led to a restructuring of their hauling contract so that they're actually saving almost $24,000 a year from that avoided servicing. So post implementation, this is a photo you're seeing of the reusable clamshells that were stocked onto these rolling carts, and then just actually goes right into the truck before they go off to each school for delivery. And the entire Palo Alto Unified School District, all elementary schools, eliminated almost 500,000 pieces of single-use items. They netted a cost savings of over $25,000 annually, eliminating 4 tons of waste annually, and that equates to 36.6 metric tons of CO2 equivalency reduced. It was very successful. So then they launched into, one more slide here about, this is kind of a cute shot of their collection system that the school came up with. And we reduced almost 100% of the items that we were targeting for reduction, and 5 of those disposable items were eliminated altogether. And the payback period for that type of project was 9.5 months. That was so successful, they moved into a phase 2 of the project, which is, you see on your left-hand side, every single side snack or every single side portion or from a lunch or a snack was organized in these 4-ounce single-use plastic ramekins with a plastic lid. And then they moved into this type of having the snacks portioned out in these stainless steel containers that students were allowed to come get, and that was approved, and they worked with the public health department to make sure that was in a safe, contamination-free way. And this is kind of a photo of their organics bin at the same time of the week. Obviously, the top one is before they went to reuse, and the bottom one is after going to reuse for their daily school lunches. Next pilot I'm going to rip through really quickly here. This Genentech is a biotech company in South San Francisco. Their contracted food management company is Bon Appetit. And there is a very active group within the company called the Green Genes. And they were really working on kind of linking climate and greenhouse gas emissions to the amount of waste that they're creating, and just wanted to see a better system and educating employees throughout that shift. And so we started by looking at lots of observational studies in terms of sitting in the cafes, watching how staff employees order, watching how they consume their food there, and then of course watching how they dispose of their, their foodware waste at the end of the meal. And this is so typical that we found that 90% of employees, these 800 employees that they're feeding daily in Cafe B33, which is just one cafe of I think almost 10 on campus, you'll see like 90% of them are hodgepodge. So you'll see like 10 different pieces of single-use packaging and maybe a reusable cup, or you'd see a reusable plate, but all plastic utensils. And so there's this really weird hodgepodge of like not normalizing that there's all this beautiful china where it's all this beautiful stuff, you're supposed to say you're going to dine in, and you get it for here, you sit down, you finish your meal, and you put these dishes just right into the rotating dish rack tray. They had a massive dishwashing system in the back. That was off most of the time. So before we impacted them with this project, they were going, we were looking at 48 different types of single-use items to target for reduction or elimination. And that was, that's over 4 million units of single-use packaging. It was costing them $163,000 a year just to buy disposable packaging for their food service at Cafe B33. And then they're paying again to get all that material hauled away. So it's not really a win-win for the business bottom line. And then they were generating over 30 tons waste. They invested $20,000 in initial setup costs to purchase the reusables and supplies. And they also estimated that the ongoing cost to maintain the new operation would be about $24,000 a year for labor, washing supplies, repurchasing damaged reusables. After implementation, this is a much healthier look of how you'd want to see your cafe with each diner look every day. We basically did a bunch of just different social marketing messaging, lots of work with the Green Genes team on campus to promote this widely through digital signage and screens, through emails, through newsletters, tabling. But basically at the end of their implementation of reuse, they eliminated 1.1 million pieces of packaging. They were netting over $12,000 of savings annually, and eliminated almost 5.79 tons of waste at an equivalency of 23 metric tons of CO2 emission reduction. We reduced 25% of the items targeted, and the payback period for that particular project was 5.5 months. Then COVID hit. So of course, I think that the big focus and shift in our industry has been focusing on what are we going to do about the takeout and delivery, because that was what was exploding during that time, and we really couldn't work with large-scale venues and large-scale institutions and partners because of no one was at these places. So, but basically we had to do a lot of work. I'd say for the first 6 months of the pandemic, it was really holding the line on 20 years of work towards eliminating plastics in our systems, and also the plastics industry coming in really heavy and saying that you could get COVID from touching a fork or a plate or a cup, and this is absolutely not the case. If you're a permanent food facility, you have a lot of experience protecting your diners and clients against really nasty bugs like Hep C, norovirus, and just like with COVID, a hot rinse cycle with soapy water removes bacteria and viruses. And so there was a public health statement that came out that Upstream worked on with Greenpeace, where we had over 130 doctors, epidemiologists, infectious disease specialists sign on to say there's no threat of transmitting COVID-19 through reusable foodware. And there certainly is no such thing as a disposable plastic cup coming out of a plastic sleeve being sterile. That's not the case either. I think there's some misconception around that. So really quickly, I just want to share 2 case studies that launched during COVID. One is Just Salad is a food chain in New York City, and they basically wanted to test out in just one of their many stores just to see if we roll out this, it's called Bring Back Bowl program. And they basically had, all they did no PR, they did no marketing. All they did is on the online ordering process through the app or the website, they would ask the diner, would you like to participate in our reusable pilot? And 20% of folks that ordered from that store during the 2-month pilot chose to get their food in a reusable. And so with that commitment then came a nudge system. Basically, it's on their receipt. They would get emails that reminded basically to return those containers back to the store into these nifty little collection stations that they had created. And yeah, they said 95% of the early adopters returned the bowls, and they're hoping. This rolled out last January, and then in May they brought in 2 more stores. And then I think the goal is really to kind of grow to 10 stores in 2022 and hopefully eliminate at least 100,000 single-use containers from their operations. A second case study that happened during COVID is Upstream partnered with a reuse service provider and dishwashing technology partner called Dishcraft Robotics here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And for years, they had always been working in the hotel, like kind of like a corporate campus delivery. So like a linen service, they would provide your sets of china for how many people, deliver cleans every day, pick up the dirties, bring it back to their highly efficient dishwashing hub in San Carlos. But of course, in the pandemic, they had to pivot, and they really wanted to test out a new reusable container concept to see if they could grow into that market as well. So we basically we recruited one restaurant to test the whole logistics and the plan of it, and to just really see, like, how do the employees feel about it? How do the diners feel about it? Is this something that's working? And it was super awesome because whenever you went to this restaurant, you ordered your food, whether it was for here or to go, they defaulted to this container for all meals. This food fit beautifully into these containers. And so basically, during the 1-month pilot, it was so successful and the customers loved it so much that they basically ended up retaining that service, and now like an ongoing permanent service as part of the Tootsie's at Stanford Barn. But they also are expanding now. So now they've tested the waters with the containers. Now they're going to be moving into stainless steel utensils as well, and that is also a service that Dishcraft provides. A couple of things I thought of interest here just to show you is that, of course, any change is really hard and it's going to take a couple of weeks to stick. The top left image here is basically week 1, like the end of week 1, and you wouldn't really expect to see any more clamshells in the organics bin at that point because everyone's getting reusable containers. So somehow, either with staff or with the diners not wanting or demanding their own container or something, we missed the mark in week 1. By the end of week 4, I saw that, you look into the organics bin here on the bottom left, and there are no containers left, and it's a fairly clean stream. So that's kind of a quick and dirty about. So Upstream pivoted to really focus on takeout and delivery models, and to understanding better how we could support the startups and entrepreneurs in the reuse service space that are meeting the moment and having, tech-enabled reusable cups and containers that can be checked out just like library books by any person going to a restaurant or a cafe or even at a large-scale event. The other thing that Upstream did was, when we were kind of down and realized that we couldn't really physically get to the places that we wanted to be piloting reuse, and we couldn't really go to large iconic venue spaces, the big goal really was about concerts, festivals, games where we would actually be rolling out reusable cups instead of all the plastic cups that are used for beer today. So we decided, well, if we can't go everywhere, then we should probably start designing our own software solution, basically an analytics platform specifically for understanding your company's waste stream and opportunities, really just focused on the food service or packaging. So if you're familiar with, or you are using LeanPath being an amazing tool that helps drive decision-making and reduce environmental impact and costs, but it's really focused just on food waste itself. And ours is an interesting complement to that, where it's actually focused on the foodware packaging waste. And so, yeah, I guess it's kind of fun. We created this brand. It's called Chartreuse. Some of you may recognize it as being a delicious drink. It's basically this green drink that's been made by Carthusian monks since the 16th century. But also, it literally means chart and reuse. And what we're trying to do is help our clients chart a better course towards a reusable service. So basically the software is, like I said, it's an analytics platform. So you can basically track all your waste data and analyze it with, you have a full visibility into your current packaging waste stream. It will do a lot of the environmental and cost impact projections for you. It comes with an education portal and limited hours of consultation support. And what we heard that would be really awesome for the large scale food management companies and the concessionaires and their clients, and then the clients' end users, is that the amount of data and the new metrics that would come out of this type of a software tool would be incredibly useful, not only to have new metrics to support their sustainability goals and reporting, but also a massive opportunity to communicate and market that out to their clients and the end users of the software. We're mainly targeting contract management companies, food contract management companies that have multi-site accounts, also concessionaires, hospitality, gaming, with a real focus in phase 1. Beta launch will be institutions and campuses. And once we've kind of created this world or a movement around reuse in food services, we're also going to be in tandem launching in the new year reuse and food service task force. So the folks that are helping us beta test and soft launch chartreuse the next coming up in January, we also be creating a task force where we can kind of hack through the challenges together. They're very similar at all campuses, no matter if you're corporate or university. The challenges, the problems will be very similar. So I think the idea to hack through those challenges, discuss issues together, but learn together, ideate solutions together, and hear how best practices from accounts and companies where it's working. So the last thing I'll just end on, and I hope I hit the time right here. Yeah, so right now, Chartreuse is a first of its kind software that will do all of this, metrics and reporting and tracking, so you can set your goals, and then at future points, you can also come back to your goals and see how well you're doing in terms of meeting those goals you stated back when. But Chartreuse, we're looking right now, we're actively, aggressively searching and recruiting for project sites to come on this journey with us to help us in the first 6 months of 2022 to pilot this software, use it, and be part of that task force to help us really understand how we can support the entire community and standardize reuse services in large scale accounts. So please don't hesitate to reach out. You can get us a demo. We're recruiting, join the mission, and thank you so much for your time. Oh, and now, I believe my job is to pass it over to Jason and Josh.
Perfect. Thank you, Samantha. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Thank you, Samantha. That was terrific. And thank you to everyone who is organizing and participating in this day. It's been terrific so far, and we look forward to the rest of the event. My name is Jason Litt. I am the Director of Innovation for Ingenium and the co-founder of Destination Zero.
And I am Josh Bradley, Site Operations Manager out here in South San Francisco at AstraZeneca. Sorry, Jason, can you present, you're not in presenters mode. We're seeing like next slide, thanks.
Bear with me one quick moment. Sorry. This is stuck. There we go. Okay. Oh. Okay.
There we go.
So, sorry about that. The focus of our panel today is obviously climbing the zero waste hierarchy. And Josh and I discovered through our experience that having a formal zero waste policy or goal in your organization and/or a commitment to a zero waste certification program will deliver the greatest impact on the hierarchy. We're going to present through a different lens, through an organizational lens, if you will, based on our recent experience to obtain true certification for AstraZeneca South San Francisco. Perhaps like us, the audience out there is interested in obviously zero waste, but also may not know where to begin or maybe plateauing somewhere along the way. So hopefully today we can provide some inspiration to any organization or event who's looking to pick up some strategies on achieving highest and best use. So the first question is what does climbing the hierarchy even mean? And from our experience, most organizations tend to start with their output. They look at their discards, and it's excellent that things are being recycled, but one needs to ask themselves, are they recycling everything that's possible? And of those materials that are being recycled, are they achieving the highest and best use? Enter the hierarchy. The hierarchy emphasizes rethink, redesign, reduction, reuse, and certainly compost. And the idea that we appreciate is that the hierarchy forces to ask the right questions, to really examine processes and products, people, materials, to really drive the results that you need to achieve status and climb the hierarchy itself.
So our journey actually started back in July of 2019 and actually just concluded as of a couple weeks ago with a true platinum certification. And our goal today is to highlight some of the highest and best use strategies implemented here in South San Francisco. So where do you start? It's difficult for a large organization to understand exactly what is coming into the building without a unifying purchasing structure. If you are well familiar with working in big businesses, what comes through and what goes out is kind of on the back burner onto what's in your head. What we actually did here was we created the zero waste zone. The zero waste zone allowed us to weigh trash daily, go through the trash and understand what exactly is coming through our doors and where it's coming from. We were able to identify which floors we're purchasing things that aren't meeting the highest and best use or can't be recycled and has to go into landfill. As we started doing this and going through the areas and understanding what is coming through our doors, we were able to really get through and pinpoint what is where our troubled areas are and what the troubled purchases are as well. Again, we implemented this floor by floor review to focus on these common discards from an area and start the upstream process. This immediately helped narrow down and get our strategies in line. Next slide, Jason.
So once we understood our data and had a solid handle on it, now it was shifting to the highest and best use. And the multitude of opportunities that exist within an organization when you focus on this aspect was astounding to us. Reduction and reuse strategies were the most prevalent. We wanted to share a ton of examples with you, but we only have a limited amount of time. So the best way to inspire everyone is to just touch on some programs we had. And the way Josh and I approached this, we talked about simple strategies that really involve one department or a product change, as well as more advanced strategies that could involve multiple departments or rewriting a process or a procedure, or even bringing in an outside individual. On the easy side, some suggestions and successes we've had working with laundered programs to eliminate single-use elements, paper towels, lab coats, especially in the R&D lab environment, as well as tablecloths for events. Ergo equipment is extremely expensive, but we developed a reuse opportunity for when individuals at AstraZeneca went remote, or we brought on new individuals. We didn't have to buy new equipment. That equipment was available. Through a deep dive review, we looked at common products in the trash and wanted to eliminate them. So AstraZeneca had displayed a lot of giveaways and perks, everything from lunch boxes to chopsticks to water bottles and durable containers, all with the intention of trying to reduce the trash that we were seeing. Same thing with the serviceware. If reusables weren't being used, we made sure that any serviceware was compostable as well. Paper is a hot topic. We not only looked at obtaining more post-consumer recycled material, but additionally really emphasized and accounted for what we could go paperless in terms of processes that would still be effective and efficient, if not even more efficient. We tackled hard to cycle materials that were common in our trash as we focused on diversion, looking at candy wrappers, nitrile gloves, and styrofoam and some other aspects that were difficult. We established reuse programs and donation programs with both outside charities as well as internal, and ultimately leveraged our software to be able to prevent any over ordering or surplus inventory. On the challenging side, we're going to highlight a couple of examples, and Josh is going to lead with one now.
I believe a common theme with issues throughout all these presentations today is obviously COVID. With COVID hitting, we had to look into disinfection a lot more and sanitization. And when we first did our first rounds of ordering, we ordered 1 gallon bottles that came with only in a 4-pack, and we were ordering multiple a week. And not only did we realize that this was a lot of packaging, but this was also a lot of recycling and or waste. So what we actually did was work with the vendor, and we found that they have 55-gallon drums. From this point, we were able to get 1 drum, and it would just come on 1 pallet, and we would actually utilize the 1 gallon containers that we were previously using as kind of carriers to the next spray bottle. Now we did get rid of a whole bunch of packaging, but we also found a hidden gem, let's say, of actual cost savings. The amount that we were ordering compared to the 155-gallon drum actually resulted in a $2,000 savings and reduction in discards by 600 pounds. The switch aligned with the highest and best use hierarchy, and ultimately we strongly consider looking into going into bulk ordering for your operations. Next slide.
We all know on the hierarchy, compost is critical to any zero waste program, and AstraZeneca was fortunate enough to already have a established outside service who manages all their compost into renewable energy. Additionally, they also had the luxury of a rooftop garden. So as part of this journey, we wanted to take this challenge onto ourselves and see how can we truly drive towards the highest and best use opportunities. So we actually did some research and located a simple system, easy to use, called a maze tumbler that we employed on the roof. And being new to the compost area, we'll say in true transparency, initially it was a challenge. Josh and I are not as familiar with composting, and we didn't take into account the blistering heat of South San Francisco on the rooftops. We created a colony of flies our first time, but since realized we needed to bring in some experts, settle down, create a formal work instruction, and now we have a long-lasting compost program on site that not only supplants the rooftop garden, but also the plethora of indoor plants in the house. And we've even considered an employee take-home program as this goes on. Compost is definitely critical to any program, and really once it's settled down, it's definitely something that you can take advantage of if you have the opportunity at your organization.
And then food donation strategies. So here at AstraZeneca, we actually have 4 dedicated pantries to each floor on all 4 floors. And our pantry food provider is Canteen, another Compass company. So working with them, we were able to, well, prior to COVID, we were actually ordering in bulk to limit the packaging coming in. But afterwards, since single-use packaging is the safest way now, we had to go through that route. And in that route, we found that there was unwanted items or anything that was close to past date a week prior. We would actually set up a food donation program with Samaritan House in San Mateo, California. This just allows us to not have to compost and then discard of the wrappers. Instead, we help out people in need. And then also with we have individually wrapped fruit, and then a harvest from our rooftop garden. Anything that was unwanted or closing in on rot date, let's say. We actually helped the exotic animals and the pets in need with the SPCA. Just a great program, a great relationship we have with both vendors, and also just community outreach is another way to rethink the highest and best use hierarchy.
So lastly, in terms of some of the higher level strategies, we looked at rethink and redesign strategies. As mentioned this morning, they have the most impact, but they're not overnight changes. A couple of examples we wanted to touch on. Josh mentioned the individually wrapped fruits. Our food vendor at AstraZeneca was, for COVID protocols, was wrapping fruits in non-recyclable packaging. We reached out to them and suggested some compostable options for protecting the safety of the fruit. And doing that, they were actually not aware and thanked us for bringing it to attention. And we're working on converting that currently. If anyone is familiar with the biopharmaceutical environment, lab consumables are a huge contributor to packaging. And the green team at AstraZeneca created an initiative to identify 5 products a year that they observed that were just ready for packaging redesign. The challenge is the complexities of the supply chain and finding the right people within the organizations to get there. And we made some strides with some programs and offered some suggestions on take-back programs that exist with those distributors and manufacturers. Additionally, what it did do was open our eyes, open the lab service team's eyes to really considering packaging as an element in their purchasing decision related to alternative products and alternative companies that had or offered take-back programs in their system. And then finally, technology is critical in all aspects of our life, but especially in zero waste. Companies are coming up with innovative ways. The lab services team actually piloted a pipette tip reuse program out there that when the evaluation's done had proved successful, that it would actually save not only hundreds of thousands of pipette tips that would be reused, but also reduce pipette tip boxes, as well as document a cost savings in the long run. So while these have the greatest impact and are the most rewarding, they're not overnight changes, but definitely worth the investment.
You have about a minute, Jason.
And lastly, I just want to say a quick word. I come from the hazardous waste world. When we approach clients on the solid waste and the zero waste side, we want to look at the entire profile. Not just simply on the solid waste, but consider the hazardous and the biological waste categories. So ultimately, we'd like to see a way to incorporate the entire profile into the highest and best use profile when you're looking at highest and best use strategies.
Cool. And quickly, just any time that a company wants to go into the zero waste initiatives, just it needs to come from the top down. It needs to be a goal, and it needs to be communicated amongst all employees. It needs to become a part of the culture, and we've actually overdone that here by having virtual displays on our screens or little reminder posters around our trash receptacles. But just having it become a part of your culture is the main focus. Brian, and thank you all for your time and attention. I know we're cutting it close. We will now share the stage with Kayla Martins, Retail Industry Leaders Association.
You're still muted, Kayla.
Yes. Thank you, Jason and Josh, for that great presentation. I don't know if you can see my screen or not. Let me.
We were able to see it. Yes.
Was it the slides?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And again, thank you for all the other presentations earlier today. They've been great. I've learned a lot through the other speakers today, but as mentioned, my name is Kayla Martins, Senior Manager of our environmental programs in the Retail Compliance Center here at the Retail Industry Leaders Association, or RILA for short. Today, I'll start by giving a brief overview of RILA, including the makeup of our membership and some of the activities and projects we've worked on related to sustainable packaging, touching on some of what our speakers have also shared. Sustainable packaging strategies has been a huge area of interest for our retailers this year, specifically for those in the zero waste community. And so I'll focus on that today. So jumping right in, It's easiest to introduce RELA and who we are by showcasing the brands we represent. On this slide, you'll see the companies that we mean when we say retail leaders in Retail Industry Leaders Association. This is a pretty purposeful list, so we actually only work with the largest retail companies in retail sectors such as automotive, grocery, apparel, drug, pharmacy, and discount stores. There is a size threshold to the retail companies who can join as members, and that's very purposeful, as so much of what we do is oriented around peer communities, which I'll dive into on the next slide. A fair portion of what RELA does as an overall organization is on the advocacy side and engagement with federal and state governments, and we are based in Washington, D.C. for that reason. Within RELA, we have over 60 member committees that work with leading executives to network and share information on leading practices, operational challenges, and industry trends. These committees cover areas such as asset protection, public policy, supply chain, legal affairs and compliance, and sustainability and environment. So what's unique about our structure at RELA and different from a lot of trade associations is we have peer groups that aren't always oriented around policy, which brings me to my next slide. Under our sustainability structure and communities, our focus is on peer-to-peer benchmarking, resource development, and the operational or legal compliance regulatory considerations our members are dealing with. The ones here in pink are led by my colleague, Erin Hyatt, and really encompass the work Erin and RELA is doing in corporate social responsibility and ESG. You'll notice in green that these three networks are under our Retail Compliance Center. The Retail Compliance Center is a public portion of RELA and focuses on developing resources such as tracking matrices, webinars, fact sheets, and more related to sustainability and environmental clients. So unlike the rest of the committees at RELA, these three networks are open to retailers who are not members, and this gives us the opportunity to bring those to the table, big or small, for peer-to-peer benchmarking. These networks intentionally focus on retail operations or the groundwork. But focusing in on the topic for today, sustainable packaging comes up most in the Zero Waste group, but also funnels through the Sustainability Committee from time to time. At RELA, we have a couple ways we are engaging with retailers on sustainable packaging. As I mentioned in the slide before, through the committees and networks, we have ongoing discussions and benchmarking with members. We use benchmarking surveys to help gauge what their peers and competitors are doing, aggregated and anonymously, of course. RELA also recently released retail climate priorities. While not directly calling out sustainable packaging, one of the areas we cover here is waste, which touches on the climate impact of materials production and waste management. And as mentioned, we provide most of our resources through the Retail Compliance Center. We've hosted several webinars open to the public, but with a retail focus on packaging, as you can see here. We have also several tracking matrices. So we track items like bottle deposit legislation, extended producer responsibility bills, consumer bag legislation, and more. Again, these are open to the public if you're interested, and I have a slide at the end with more details and links. But the most direct project we have been working on this year is this sustainable packaging project. It was requested from our retail members to understand what sustainable packaging strategies are being deployed by retailers, and as well as considering what the future needs might be for packaging and retail supply chains to better enable sustainability. So we started by launching a survey among our members to understand the barriers that persist for sustainable packaging. From that, we focused in on LDPE film, as that is a material used in many retail packaging applications. So pausing there, much of what I'll discuss today is using LDPE film as an example, or more specifically, polybags. But anyway, we hosted workshop calls on LDPE film on topics like elimination and reduction, alternative materials and reuse options, end of life considerations, and our last call focused on the distribution center of the future and how we can accommodate sustainable packaging solutions. And most of the calls we actually co-hosted with a organization called Chainalytics, who are supply chain matter experts as well as packaging experts. So we really valued having them bring that perspective to the table. These calls were intended again to do some of the peer-to-peer benchmarking, but also we invited external organizations like the Recycling Partnership, Sustainable Packaging Coalition, or the Outdoor Industry Association to listen in hopes that they would be inspired to take those learnings from the calls and develop a pilot or program. We ourselves are in the works of developing 2 resources from this project, one being a pro-con resource for LDPE film, summarizing the learnings from the calls, and also developing some helpful considerations. We also plan to develop a resource on the distribution center of the future, summarizing the considerations needed for accommodating sustainable packaging solutions. So we're hoping to release those by end of Q1 in 2022, and those will be public. So much of what I'll cover in my next slides will be the lessons learned and considerations from these calls and the survey that retailers have shared around sustainable packaging. So getting to the meat of it, we have several retail members with sustainable packaging goals and those who are leading the way in sustainable packaging strategies. This list is not exhaustive, but yet gives you a snapshot of those who are leaders and innovators in this space and what are some of the trends we're seeing as far as sustainable packaging goals. We have retailers like REI and VF who are really focused on the elimination of single-use plastic packaging. VF, for example, recently announced their goal to eliminate all single-use plastic packaging by 2025. Retailers like Lululemon are focused on the reduction of single-use plastic packaging, committing to reduce such packaging by 50% by 2025. And then looking at retailers like Nike, Walmart, Target, Starbucks, they're all focused on things like recycled content, recyclability, compostability, and reusability of packaging. Walmart, for example, is looking to have 100% recyclable, reusable, or industrially compostable packaging in all Walmart private brand products by 2025. And Starbucks wants to double the recycled content, recyclability, compostability, and reusability of Starbucks cups and packaging by 2022. Now, as I mentioned, the retailers on this slide here, who are definitely leading the way. We did survey our members about sustainable packaging, and 88% of those who filled it out indicated the sustainable packaging policy or goal they have set is actually the first one they've set. So there's still quite a few retailers who are at the beginning of their sustainable packaging journeys. The small 12% from that survey question are actually setting more ambitious goals than their prior sustainable packaging goal. And you can imagine many of the retailers shown on this slide here have done that. So that's just some background on what targets and goals retailers have in relation to sustainable packaging. As I mentioned earlier, from what you can tell from these retailer goals that I listed off, there is a huge focus on that LDPE film and sustainable, and more specifically polybags. So I wanted to take a step back and dive into what some of the internal and external forces are for retailers in considering sustainable packaging. Without a doubt, there are environmental pressures from the packaging life cycle and the need to clean up land and ocean litter. We know some of the negative environmental impacts also include energy use, deforestation, fossil fuel extraction, and more. There's also regulatory pressure. We're seeing an increase in single-use plastic bans, fees on certain plastics and packaging, and as we recently saw in Oregon and Maine, there's a push to make producers, which retailers can fall under, responsible for the packaging they produce. There's also consumer demand. Consumers are increasingly becoming aware of the environmental impacts of products and materials and are looking for more sustainable packaging, especially recyclable packaging and recycled content. In our own survey on sustainable packaging, about 40% of our retailers indicated consumers have responded negatively to perceived unsustainable packaging like oversized e-commerce boxes or too much protective packaging. As I mentioned in the slide before, many retailers have set 2025 and 2030 goals in relation to sustainable packaging, and the clock is running to meet those goals. There's also stakeholder pressure from employees, also investors. Both employees and investors understand that businesses have a key role to play in tackling urgent challenges such as climate change, and investors are becoming increasingly assertive in holding companies to account on environmental issues. So with all these forces at play, it leads me to my next slide on what sustainable packaging strategies retailers have thought through or tested to address those forces and those pressures. One common strategy that retailers have used is elimination and or reduction, looking at options such as size optimization. One potential low-hanging fruit is right-sizing packaging. You'll see pictured in this photo on the top left, the product is significantly smaller than the packaging. So some retailers have found that by right-sizing that packaging, you can reduce the amount of packaging without compromising qualities such as, or things such as the protective qualities of the product. Other considerations are material optimization. For some, it's easy to lightweight packaging or decrease the thickness of a packaging material, which of course use less material, less plastic in this case. Others are going the route of reducing the virgin material within packaging and using recycled content. As I'll detail on my next slide, these options can come with considerable barriers and trade-offs. And as I mentioned, with retailers like VF, they're moving full speed ahead with fully eliminating single-use packaging. So that's one of the best options out there, but a lot of retailers aren't quite there yet. You'll see in the picture in the bottom left, this is from REI. They have successfully tested a roll pack method. Products are loosely rolled and secured with a small twist of paper. So REI has completely eliminated individual polybags from their own apparel supply chain and are asking their vendor partners to follow suit. Within the industry, some retailers are looking at what other materials they could use for packaging, especially in place of LDPE film. So using paper mailers or looking at biodegradable or compostable material are options as well. The last common strategy we are seeing from the retail industry is reuse options, which a couple of our speakers have talked about today. So like the photo here in the middle right, finding a material that makes sense for reuse and setting up a collection process. This one takes a huge amount of engagement with the consumer to make sure that reusable material is collected back, but also it's important that the reusable material sustains a long enough life to offset some of the costs that come with collection or the material itself. So those are, Taylor. I'm sorry?
2 minutes.
Okay. So those are the options or the common strategies retailers have considered and tested when thinking about sustainable packaging. To implement any of those, it has been important for retailers to think through some of the potential barriers that may come up, and I'll go through these pretty quickly. This is not an exhaustive list, but some of what came up in our survey. Cost, of course, can be a huge barrier, especially if you're considering sustainable packaging. For those retailers who are just starting their sustainable packaging journey or considering it, there can be significant R&D costs for better packaging. But the key to overcoming that barrier is to look at the potential cost savings. So if a company is considering right-sizing their packaging, for example, there may be some upfront costs to determine how to provide the right amount of cushioning without going overboard. But the cost savings are in the elimination of plastic. One of the other barriers that has come up in the industry is the recyclability of that package. There are local, regional, and commercial variations in acceptability of certain plastic grades for recycling, and much of the existing LDPE film packaging is not recyclable in a traditional municipal recycling facility. So thinking back to those internal and external forces I mentioned, there's an increased demand for retailers and producers to consider the end of life of their products and materials, which can include its ability to be recycled. So as a retailer looking to lightweight or use alternative materials for packaging, for example, it's key for them to understand if it changes the end of life. The compromise of packaging protective qualities is another barrier. In some cases, if you eliminate an individual poly bag, you lose the protection from dirt, dust, and scratches, tears. Even lightweighting could potentially leave a product at a higher risk for damage. So for some retailers, depending on the product they have, they'll have to test what alternatives or strategies they can use and think through trade-offs and pros and cons, including the potential carbon trade-off between damaged product and sustainable packaging. And the last one I'll go through here quickly that we've seen is the ability for the package to move through the supply chain. If we look at retailers who've eliminated individual poly bags, one of the challenges they had to work through was how to get their product from point A to point B without individual poly bag while also minimizing product damage. So to ensure options like package elimination or the use of alternative materials can move through the supply chain, there's quite a bit of collaboration that needs to occur. And this can lead to some complexity when several departments in a company have a stake in packaging and when different companies in the supply chain have different requirements for it. So it really comes down to collaboration there and understanding the sustainability goals, but also understanding how product works. So If I had more time, I'd dive into a couple others and potential solutions, but I know I am probably right on time. So just wanted to quickly highlight a list of some of the resources I've mentioned today. So all these resources linked are the ones most related to this session today, and all are public. And mentioned some of the ones on the horizon, but did want to quickly highlight also this clearinghouse we'll be doing with FMI, which is intended to be sort of a one-stop shop on guidance, legislation, resources related to sustainable packaging. So stay tuned for that. And with that, I know I'm out of time, so thank you all. I know I covered it a lot in a short amount of time, but look forward to any questions you may have. Thank you.
And Kayla, thank you so much. If we do have a few extra minutes, we can possibly return to some of these, but looks like we have about 5 minutes left to cover some questions. I have just a few questions for each of you, so I'll pick out some of the interesting key ones, or maybe some quick ones. For example, Diane Landry asked, how is styrofoam reused? And I think that was directed at Samantha.
I believe it's me and Jason.
Oh, Jason.
I don't recommend reusing styrofoam.
So
Go ahead.
it's a great question, and it's a hard challenge in many environments, especially in the lab environment. The packaging for samples and needs to maintain temperatures, so styrofoam is brought in at a pretty significant clip. But there are companies out there who will densify it and reuse it as building material for future use as well. So it's hard to find, but they do exist.
Great. So when it's densified and things like that, it's more of a recycling or than necessarily reusing the same.
Correct. Yeah. So good. Thank you, Dan. Yes. So densifying on the recycling end, and then we reused them on site more in a transport capacity. Josh mentioned the food, maintaining the coolness of the food. So we used them more in individual transport capacities, as well as some domestic shipments.
Sure. Carrie asks, Samantha, how do you measure GHG reductions, emission reductions in relations to reuse programs?
Thanks, that's a great question. So basically we are using an adaptation of EPA's WARM modeling. So for example, we know the weight per item of a 9x9 fiber clamshell or a 16-ounce plastic lined fiber hot cup. And so once we know the weights of all those per item units, we aggregate it out. So if your company eliminated 3 million 16-ounce hot cups in the course of a year, we basically can use that number to aggregate out the total weight of plastic and fiber consumed, and then plug that into EPA's WARM modeling. That's kind of our way about doing it.
Excellent. I assume you use the, not necessarily the recycling tab in the WARM modeling, but the source reduction tab.
Yeah, so but most of the EPA's WARM modeling is, my understanding, is based on avoidance from landfill, right? So source reduction is definitely a big component of that. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Carrie Niemeyer asks Kayla, are the goals for retail leaders and innovators setting, are the goals that they are setting for sustainable packaging accompanied by plans on how to get there?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're thinking goals versus targets, those goals are, maybe I think the targets are what they set to get there. And many have broader, the sustainable packaging goals they have are part of broader sustainability or waste reduction goals. And all of the ones that I mentioned are public. So you're, able to go online and review those reports and how they're making progress every single year. So a lot of those will start coming out, in Q1, Q2 of next year. So we'll be able to keep track of how close retailers are to hitting those goals.
Excellent. And we have about 1 minute left. Josh and Jason, from your experience, can you name a challenge that organizations face achieving higher and best use strategies?
I'll just share quickly in the 15 seconds. The challenge is time. Everybody is busy with so much going on. You really need to dedicate time to all these initiatives, and you'll find that with more time, the culture will engage.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, it's just setting the building up for success. You know, do you provide all the waste streams available for the employees to discard their items? Obviously, teaching has to go into it too, but definitely, as long as you have things built in, it'll make it a lot easier for your corporation.
Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.